worship the Lord. Worship in spirit and truth. Those who say that they know him must walk as he walked. He is the way and the truth, and in him is life. If we obey his word, then we walk in the light. He is the way and the truth, and in him is life. If we obey his word, then we walk in the light. If we say that we know him, but we don't keep his word, then we walk in the darkness, and the truth's not in us. If we walk in the light, we will have fellowship sweet, and the blood of Jesus will cleanse us from sin. He is the way and the truth, and in him is life. If we obey his word, then we walk in the light. He is the way and the truth, and in him is life. If we obey his word, then we walk in the light. He is the way and the truth, and in him is life. If we obey his word, then we walk in the light. He is the way and the truth, and in him is life. If we obey his word, then we walk in the light.
Well, good morning, friends. Good to be here with you today. And as we jump into Acts chapter 24, this is actually a section. There is a lot of space, a lot of words given to Paul's arrest and trial. I mean, several chapters are given to what takes place with Paul. I mean, Luke had been traveling with Paul, and so to think that the earlier chapters were things perhaps that some of which Luke picked up by penning the eyewitness accounts. And then later in the book of Acts here, we see Luke now traveling with Paul and writing in first person very often. So he is there to get the firsthand account of what is happening. And so perhaps that is why we have so many chapters about Paul and his arrest and trial and whatnot. And so we pick up here in Acts chapter 24 this morning. Paul is under arrest. He is in Caesarea Maritima, which is on the coast of the Aegean Sea. The Mediterranean Sea. And you can go there today and see the place where they believe Paul was kept. I mean, it wasn't anything elaborate or fancy. There is a place. I mean, he had some freedoms. People could come and see him. People could bring him things. He maybe could wander about the town, perhaps some, but he was kept in this spot. And you can go to Caesarea Maritima to this day, and people can point out, or you can see the place where Paul. They believe where Paul may have been kept for this period of time. Now, you're going to realize by the end of the chapter that we're not talking a short, like 30 days or something like this. Paul is in holding for at least 730 days, perhaps even longer than that. and we'll see this by the time we get to the end of the chapter. So let's get into it. It says, 5 days later, the high priest Ananias went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus, and they brought their charges against Paul before the governor. Now, again, I just want to point out when it says went down, the idea of going down, I mean, they're actually going up. Caesarea Maritima is northwest of Jerusalem, but we always speak of going up to Jerusalem or going down out of Jerusalem, no matter what direction you're going. So I'm just wanting to point out where Caesarea Maritima was, northwest on the coast of the Mediterranean, northwest. I'm guessing it's probably 50 miles northwest of Jerusalem. So that is where they're going, or that is where they are. So when it says the high priest went down, it means going out of Jerusalem up to the place of Caesarea Maritima. He says he took some of the elders. He took a lawyer named Tertullus. I mean, they're going full out on this, okay? And they're bringing their charges against Paul before the governor. And verse 2 says, when Paul was called in, Tertullus presented his case before Felix, and he started with these wonderful, winsome words trying to win Felix over. We have enjoyed a long period of peace under you, and your foresight has brought about reforms in this nation. I mean, he's buttering him up. That is exactly what he is doing. Everywhere and in every way, most excellent Felix, we acknowledge this with profound gratitude. But in order not to weary you further, I would request that you be kind enough to hear us briefly. Move it up on the screen. We have found this man to be a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world. He is a ringleader of the Nazarene sect and even tried to desecrate the temple, so we seized him. Now, there is some legitimacy to what we read here in this sense. I mean, riots had been stirred up, but Paul wasn't trying to stir riots. It was often the Jewish people who began the riots. So there is some degree of truth, but he wasn't trying to desecrate the temple. We'll read about this here in just a little bit. We'll hear Paul's retort, Paul's reply. It says, so because he was doing this, we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to learn the truth about all these charges we're bringing against him. The other Jews joined in the accusation, asserting these things were true. I mean, they're liars. I mean, what we see in courts today, the same thing happened then. I mean, it's nothing new to see people kind of spinning things. They were spin masters. They were spin doctors. Okay. So Paul replies, we're at verse 10 now. It says, when the governor motioned for him to speak, Paul replied, I know that for a number of years you have been a judge over this nation, so I gladly make my defense. You can easily verify that no more than 12 days ago, I went up to Jerusalem to worship. My accusers did not find me arguing with anyone at the temple or stirring up a crowd in the synagogues or anywhere else. I mean, Paul would have his own witnesses that he could bring in as well. And he says, they cannot prove to you the charges they are making against me. I mean, he's saying basically, look, it's their word against my word. And Paul would be prepared then to bring other witnesses if need be. Down at verse 14, he says, however, I do admit that I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way. I mean, the church was often called the way in that day, which they call a sect. I believe everything that is in accordance with the law and that is written in the prophets. And I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. Now, I just want to throw us back for a moment to remember Paul had stirred up the trouble because he knew that between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they believed different things. The Sadducees do not believe in the resurrection. They do not believe in the supernatural. They do not believe in the miraculous, whereas the Pharisees do. So even in what he is doing here, he is kind of pitting some of them against one another. Again, hoping to drive that wedge, and that wedge would then come out to prove itself as he makes his appeal before Felix. That was verse 15. I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. You know, I want to pause on that point for a moment. Do we know what we believe in and why we believe it? That is a key question that I have. Do you know what you believe and why you believe it? I hope that you can say, yes, I know what I believe. What do you believe about the resurrection? What do you believe about the Trinity? What do you believe about the character and the nature of God? What do you believe about salvation? What do you believe about spirit beings, angels and demons? What do you believe about heaven? What do you believe about hell? What do you believe about sin and righteousness? What do you believe on these matters? Now, the reason I highlight this is to promote opportunity. In just 3 weeks, on the 21st of this month, there will be another opportunity to hear Dr. David Lambertson lead a group of people, and you can be a part of that group of people through the second half, I'll put it this way, the second half of the New Testament, through the epistles, in a 2 to 2.5 hour workshop conducted on Monday night, July 21st, over at Central Church. And there's a link I can send you. You could go to nebc.edu if you'd be interested in that. Make note of that. You could just show up as well. But it's a chance for you to strengthen your faith. Then later on August 25th, another event by Pastor Ryan Goding of Summit Faith Community is the name of their church over in Farmington. And you could participate that night as well to help yourself be strengthened in your faith. Another 2.5 hour lecture. And the 50-some people that were at the one on this past Monday night, I mean, 52 people, they went out all juiced up, all charged up. And so I just encourage you, there's some opportunity. The Pharisees believe one thing, the Sadducees believe another. Paul is now stating what he believes, and then he continues on saying this in verse 16. I strive always to keep my conscience clean before God and man. Paul is trying to maintain a clear conscience. Do we do the same? Do we seek to live before the Lord that we know that we would be pleasing him? I hope that's the case for you. Verse 18, I was ceremonially clean when they found me in the temple doing this. There was no crowd with me, nor was I involved in any disturbance. But there are some Jews from the province of Asia, which, again, that's Turkey we're talking about, who ought to be here before you and bring charges if they have anything against me. So he's saying where these ones are from. Or these who are here should state what crime they found in me when I stood before the Sanhedrin. Unless it is this one thing, I shouted as I stood in their presence, it is concerning the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today. That is what he said, and that is what stirred them up. And so Paul says, here's the one thing. And I didn't say it in the public space. I didn't say it in the public arena. I said this one thing when I was standing in their presence, when they had me under their own trial. And this is the one thing that I said. So how does Felix respond? This is the way Felix responds. He says, Felix, who was well acquainted with the way. So, I mean, Felix knew about the church. Felix knew about Christianity. It says he was well acquainted. Now, it doesn't say he was a believer. We don't know if he was a believer or not a believer. It just says he was well acquainted with the way. So he knew some of what was going on in the church, among the church. It says he adjourned the proceedings. When Lysias, the commander, comes, he said, I will decide your case. He ordered the centurion to keep Paul under guard, but to give him some freedom and permit his friends to take care of his needs. So, I mean, he wasn't held like a hostile prisoner, no, and yet he wasn't necessarily held in a palace either, but he did have some freedom. He could request the books, he could request the writings, he could request the scrolls. His friends could come to him. He could have visitors. They could take care of his needs. So he did have some freedom, but we're going to get in just a moment here to how long Paul was kept under prison, kept under lock and key. Verse 24, several days later, Felix came with his wife, Drusilla, who was Jewish. He sent for Paul and listened to him as he spoke about faith in Christ Jesus. I mean, look at what Paul is doing. He continues sharing about Jesus. He takes the opportunity to share about Christ. And so my encouragement that you too would take the opportunity to share about Christ. When you have the opportunities, take them. Share about Jesus. Here's Paul. He's before a governor and sharing about Christ. Now, I've had and likely will have again over this next election cycle the opportunity to speak with prospective governors. I was in the room about a month ago or so with a former governor, a current governor, and two prospective governors for our state of Maine. And once I move out of the daily aspect of the daily discipleship podcast that I shared about yesterday, I'm thinking I may try to get a hold of some of these ones and see if I can't do some, if it's in their time, do some interviews with at least a couple of the Christians that are running for office. Because there are two who are running for office for governor of our state, and I'd love to interview them. Talk about faith. Talk about faith in the public space. So, verse 25, as Paul talked about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and said, now notice what Paul talked about. I mean, he didn't just say, hey, try Jesus and everything will be sweet and be peaches and cream. He talks about righteousness. He talks about there is a righteous standard. There is a righteous way. There are things that you need to be applying to your life. There is self-control that you need to apply to your life. And there's judgment to come. That's something that often we do not hear in churches in the modern era. We give a lot of how-tos, a lot of helpful hints for marriage, helpful hints for parenting, helpful hints for finances, and I'm not saying it's bad stuff. It's very topical stuff, but we tend to stay away from pushing on people about righteousness. We tend to stay away from pushing on people about self-control, and we tend to not talk about the coming judgment. Yet that was the very thing that had the biggest impact on Felix, because it said in verse 25, it made Felix afraid. And his response was, that's enough for now. And he says in verse 25, that's enough for now. You may leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you. I mean, what's going on is Felix was under conviction. And sometimes as we're sharing the message of the gospel, people fall under conviction. Sometimes when someone is agitated around Christians, they're agitated because they're being convicted about their life. And God, the Holy Spirit, is saying, you need to give your life to Christ as well. That's exactly what's happening with Felix. He is under the conviction of the Spirit. He's feeling guilty for maybe not turning to Jesus. Perhaps there's unrighteousness about his life. Maybe he worshiped little idols. Maybe he was sexually practiced sexual freedom, even though he had a wife named Drusilla. I mean, in that day, they often had open marriages, and were very libertarian, and I don't mean that in a political sense, but very free, very liberated in what they would do, and perhaps as Paul spoke about righteousness and self-control, maybe the word self-control comes up here because he is challenging. He is challenging Felix on that very issue. He knows maybe Felix has several mistresses, and saying, "Look, you need to be faithful to your wife," and those types of things were happening, and so Felix is under conviction here, and that's why he says, "That's enough for now. You may leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you." Now, let me bring up these last few verses in this section. At that time, let me go back. At the same time, he was hoping Paul would offer him a bribe. So he sent for him frequently and talked with him. Now, I mean, Paul had access to money. He had people who supported him in his ministry. Paul had done his tent making work. Paul wasn't spending lots of money in lodging and meals. And at one point, I shared with you one of the missionary journeys. We did an assessment. In fact, somebody else did the assessment, and I just reported on it, that they felt that, I think it was the first missionary journey, cost around $300,000 in today's economy. So, I mean, that's the type of money that Paul was needing to raise for what he was doing, or the types of contributions that were being made, and perhaps those that traveled with him also found means of making contributions. So Felix knows that Paul has access to funds through ministry supporters, or he just perceives that maybe Paul is independently wealthy. In that part of the world, it is very, very common to look for a bribe. I'll tell you a story about getting into an African country. I'm not going to say what specific country, but I was told you do not need a visa to come into the country. So we flew from where we were in South Sudan and landed in this other African country. Well, I guess it won't hurt if I tell you it was Kenya. And when we landed, they asked for my visa. And I said, I don't have a visa. I was told I could get a visa when I get here. And they said, well, that isn't exactly the case. You really needed to have ordered your visa, yada, 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 yada. And my friend, Joseph, who was with me, Joseph Narizi, said, let me take care of this. So they had me step out of the room, and Joseph went in. And basically, he gave him some money, because that's how it works over there. I mean, you pay a little bit of money, and that's what they're looking for. You pay some money, and next thing I know, they're calling me back in, and here's your visa. Traveling in South Sudan, oftentimes it was that way, that you would get stopped at various road stops. Some were legitimate military, some were illegitimate military. They were people, it was a ruse, people making themselves look like they were the military, stopping cars, and basically you just had to pay the bribe. Well, Felix was waiting for the bribe here from Paul, and it's something that never came. So verse 26 says, at the same time, he was hoping that Paul would offer a bribe, and he sent for him frequently and talked with him. So I do want to draw something out of this in verse 26, just the idea of the bribe, or not the bribe, but the conversation. 2 years. Sometimes your witnessing is going to take time. Sometimes it's not going to be just a case of a one-time witness. Sometimes it's going to require that you continue talking with somebody over a length of time. It may take years. Now, I'm not saying that every time you're with somebody, you hit them hard with the gospel. We do CPR. We cultivate, we plant, we reap. That little acrostic that I've used before, cultivating, planting, reaping. So you do that. You cultivate the relationship. You plant seeds as you go along the way. And along the way also, sometimes you say, now, what about you and Jesus? Are you ready to trust your life to Jesus yet? And we see this in verse 24, chapter 24, verse 26. At the bottom of the screen, at that same time, hoping Paul would offer him a bribe, he sent for him frequently and talked with him. Paul kept going. Paul could have said, look, I don't want to go. He just wants my money. But no, Paul kept going because he kept sharing the gospel. And that's kind of the same thing that we need to do. Now Carrie has and Carrie, great knowing you're on here with us. Carrie has some thoughts. Glad for the reminder that someone's response to our sharing the gospel is their own conviction, not necessarily a negative reaction to us personally. And I think we always need to remember that if they're rejecting us as we share the gospel, ultimately they're rejecting the gospel. Now they may also, I want to say this, they may also reject us. Often we say they're not rejecting us, they're rejecting the gospel. But we kind of get lumped in with that sometimes. And I appreciate what you're saying. And we do need to remember that ultimately, yes, they're rejecting the gospel, not us. Ultimately, that is true. And sometimes with a person that we have a relationship with, they're not rejecting us. They are rejecting the gospel. They'll continue to be our friends. They'll continue to talk to us. If we have enough sensibility to kind of back off a little bit. Now, if we keep pressing on the issue, they may disown us as friends. We talk about the principle of the green light, yellow light, red light. I mean, if they say, hey, I want to talk more about this, that's a green light. If they say, I'm really not thinking about things much that way today, and why don't we talk about the upcoming football season? That's a yellow light. That is like, okay, I'm not totally closed, but I don't want to press further with this. And then sometimes it's like, I don't want to talk about this anymore ever again. That's a red light. And if you're in a relationship with somebody, in a friendship with them, you need to be able to read the signals and know what to do. And I would encourage you to not continue to press on them if they've given you a clear red light. Now, sometimes people will disown you. That happened to me. That's probably happened, Carrie. I would assume probably has happened to you and Jason along the way as well, where maybe some friends do disown us. But often it is the conviction of the Spirit that is at work in someone's life that is causing them to respond that way. Now, let me close this chapter out here with the last verse. It says, when 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, but because Felix wanted to grant a favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison. There is the 780 days. Minimally, 2 years had passed. That much time had passed. Paul was kept in prison for 2 years. You would think, okay, 30 days, couple months maybe. Here we see Paul in prison in Caesarea Maritima. Again, if you go to Israel with us for one of the trips, we're still at this point planning to go in the end of October, beginning of November. If you want to get in on that, let me know. If you haven't already told me, we already have the studies that are going out to people, and we're still planning on it. I mean, look what's happening. There's a peace ceasefire taking place, and they're moving toward peace there. You may end up seeing some remnants of some war fighting that's taken place, some buildings that have been damaged in some places. You may or may not see that. It just depends on where those places are. But 2 years. Felix, 2 years. And if you go with us, you get to see Caesarea Maritima, you would see this. But 2 years. How long are you willing to be laid siege for your faith? That is a question I would ask you. I mean, it may be a period of time in which you're laid siege. I mean, in this case, it's imprisonment. For our friends in South Sudan, our friends especially in Pakistan or other places around the world that do listen to us, some of them are in those situations where they could be laid siege, put in prison. Their belongings could be confiscated. Zara has shared with us before about times that what we call our cousins, speaking about another religious group, they've broken in, stolen their Bibles, burned their Bibles. Sometimes they burn furniture, things of that nature. I mean, you may suffer persecution in some of those places in the world. What price are you willing to pay? What price am I willing to pay for our faith? That is a question we need to wrestle with and think through. And hopefully you and I would be able to say, hey, I'm willing to be like Paul. I'm willing to go to prison for Jesus. I'm willing to be unfriended because of Jesus, because I want to stand for Jesus. Lord, help us. Help us to stand resolute in our faith. Help us to be willing, if it means we're laid siege for a couple of years, to be willing to do that. But also give us wisdom in our witness, because we do not need to be bombastic, and we do not need to be difficult in our relationships. Give us wisdom as we seek to perform spiritual CPR, breathing spiritual life into other people as we cultivate, plant, and reap. And we do want to pray for this friend who received a terminal diagnosis that Fran has just mentioned, praying for the Lord to give him the right words to help him spiritually, praying for Tim and his family. Lord, hear our prayer for him and for others in the struggles and the difficulties that they face. We look to you. We depend upon you, Lord Jesus.